Hey everybody, some gadget guy here, and I was a little late in getting my hands on the LG G Flex, so instead of doing my normal routine of doing a really long first impressions video and then doing all of my other benchmarks and tests, I went straight into reviewing the phone. Now, I've already posted my camera review and my speaker review on the LG G Flex, so you can see how the 4K video is going to look off of this image sensor, and then also how the back speaker is going to sound compared to all of the other phones that we put through that test bench. And now that I've spent a couple weeks playing with the phone, I just wanted to share my experiences in using LG's monstrous flexible phablet. So I've already posted a comparison video between the G Flex and the G2, and the main basis of that video is pretty much to illustrate that almost everything that I've liked about the G2 is better on the G Flex. The software experience is a little more polished, it's a little more refined, and LG's added some nice benefits like the proper split screening of apps. The camera hardware plus software integration has also evolved, and I've noticed that this thing performs slightly but noticeably better than the G2 in almost every test I throw at it. Not to mention 4K video recording is kind of cool. And while all of these individual hardware and software improvements are appreciated, they're kind of also to be expected. This phone is newer, it should be better than its predecessors. That's maybe been one of the most disappointing aspects of following the commentary on the LG G Flex. All too often I find people are reviewing what the phone isn't as opposed to talking about what the phone actually is. Case in point, a lot of people were making hay about the lower screen resolution, that to get this flexible AMOLED panel in a consumer grade device that wouldn't be ridiculously expensive, LG opted for a 720p panel. After using phones like the LG G2, the Galaxy S4, the HTC One, we're sort of used to 1080p in smaller form factors, so moving up to a larger screen with a lower resolution, yeah, I could see where that could be a bummer for some people. And especially going toe-to-toe with devices like the Lumia 1520, when you put these screens side by side, there is a subtle clarity advantage on the 1520. But that's not really how we use our phones. I don't hold a phone screen this size, this close to my face to try and detect if there's any pixelation happening. Nor do I often have that situation in real world usage where I'm putting two phone screens mashed up next to each other to try and detect any graininess or any subtle differences in screen clarity or screen resolution. It's just not what we do when we're out and about using our phones. When I'm holding the G Flex at a reasonable distance from my face, there hasn't been any app or service which has been hamstrung by the fewer number of dots on this screen. Plus, 720p with a proper RGB stripe sub-pixel arrangement is a pretty good screen. So that's always been one of my biggest bummers when talking Android hardware, is that we kind of get stuck just on the spec sheet and we never really move beyond that. You know, the megapixels and the gigaflips and how many Ps are on your screen. People always freaking out about how many Ps are on their screen. So let's really talk what this phone actually is. And for me personally, to date, it's one of the best large screen phablet experiences that I've had the pleasure of reviewing. LG's given us great consideration to the ergonomics and shape of a device this large. And not necessarily just the screen bend, but even the rounded corners on the sides give you something a little bit easier to hold on to. And I appreciate that with my tiny girly little hands. Phablets always suffer with a one-handed experience, but those times when you do try and use your phone on the go, it's a little bit easier to utilize the services on this phone than other devices, which I also like, but are definitely more two-handed experiences. Plus, there's a peace of mind element to using a display like this. Knowing that it has a little bit of a bend or a flex to it means that it should prove to be just a little bit more durable in the event of a drop. You can still crack this screen, especially if it takes a corner drop, but hopefully just that day-to-day abuse that we put our mobile devices through, hopefully this ages a bit more gracefully than some of our other glass screens have. Like, I'll throw it into a back pocket and I can be reasonably sure that it's gonna survive if I accidentally sit down on it a couple times, which I have. Like, especially you folks out there with iPhone 4s, we know the horrors of the front or back glass panel shattering. Which also brings us to another interesting experience in this back plate being somewhat self-healable. This phone has ended up in pockets with keys, it's ended up in my camera bag, and these little light abrasions actually do a pretty good job of fading. They never completely disappear, but they do minimize, and with the brushed texture on this backplate, they're as good as invisible after a couple hours. Now, unfortunately, I got a really nasty gouge in my LG when I chucked it into my camera bag. Gotta be careful because the same thing also happened to my 1520. I've gotta stop throwing super large phones in bags full of sharp, pokey gear. And that one was really a bummer because LG does not claim that big, deep gouges will be able to self-heal, but I was surprised that over the course of the next day, there was a minimization of how bad the damage looked on my G Flex. Again, it won't completely go away, but I appreciate the fact that over time, this thing should still look a little bit better than some of my other plastic phones. That's a conversation that I hope more manufacturers continue having. Sony and Samsung looking at waterproofing, and LG delivering an experience which should age pretty gracefully over time. I also have to applaud LG on their continued discussion of ergonomics. I'm still not sold on the back button arrangement. I don't really think it's better or worse than traditional side-mounted buttons on other phones. But one simple touch in moving the IR blaster to the back of the phone actually made a lot of sense. With phones like the G2, we're used to utilizing the universal remote app just like we would regular remotes, holding them, pointing them flat out, and hitting the buttons to change channels and control the volume, control your stereo or your DVR. But on a smooth, featureless touchscreen, it requires sort of an eyes down glance to look at that. And you can kind of hold it lower, but where my TV's mounted, I kind of have to move it up over the coffee table. And it's not a problem, but it's not the most convenient aiming aspect to try and get control over my TV from my phone. Whereas moving it to the back of the phone, I'm actually looking at the screen to control various aspects of my entertainment equipment. And what's funny about that is that it probably wasn't by design. It was probably a design compromise they had to make considering the bend and curve of the screen and not having a lot of space on the top edge of the phone. But it makes sense when you use it. It's almost getting a little boring when we talk about high-end phones that, oh yeah, it's fast and it's powerful and you can play games on it. All of that stuff is great. Like, I'm running out of adjectives to use to describe the performance of various high-end consumer electronics. Where I do have a criticism is in radio management, specifically Wi-Fi. This thing will hold on to your Wi-Fi signal long past its ability to actually use that as a data connection. And it's not one of the strongest Wi-Fi radios I've ever encountered. Especially compared to Samsung's, Motorola's, and Nokia's, I tend to lose signal a few feet sooner than I do on other high-end Premier smartphones. It's not a huge knock against the phone, and if you've got good Wi-Fi in your home, it probably won't affect you, but that is a general trend I've noticed with other LGs that I've played with. That criticism is also unique to the Wi-Fi radios. I've gotten really good reception on AT&T's network over LTE. Especially in my area, AT&T's done a pretty good job of improving their network here, so I've been getting fast data and I've been getting excellent phone call reception. Now, speaking of phone calls, while people don't seem to have any issues hearing me, this top earpiece isn't the loudest that I've encountered. It's perfectly adequate indoors, and then also maybe like if you're a commuter, but when I'm out and about walking around, traffic noise is easily able to obliterate what this earpiece is capable of delivering, and I find myself having to turn to other solutions for phone calls like Bluetooth earpieces and headphones, or the bare minimum of turning this over into a speakerphone and then talking on the phone backwards. The mics on board, though, do a really good job of noise reduction for people listening to your call. But those are pretty much the main criticisms that I can levy at this device. Battery life is excellent. I got 2 days on one charge, not maxing out screen brightness and not playing a lot of games. Performance is incredible. This Qualcomm 800 chipset is proving to be formidable. And LG's done an excellent job of improving their software experience. Starting with the Optimus G Pro, moving into the G2, and now handling the G Flex. I'm liking this company more and more, and I'm excited by a company that seems hungry for some competition. This is not just some cookie cutter copycat of the Galaxy Note 3. This is a unique phablet large screened experience. And it definitely stands at that tier of top 3. The Lumia 1520, the Galaxy Note 3, and this puppy all have unique experiences to offer. And I'm always gonna be a fan of a little competition. To that end, this is my favorite large screen phone. It's not my favorite all-time phone, but it is my favorite phablet. And thanks to devices like the G Flex and the Lumia 1520, I just do not pick up mini tablets at all anymore. I used to carry my little Nexus 7 in addition to some other phone, and you know, a 6-inch screen phone does a pretty good job of replacing my need for a 7-inch screened data delivery device. So folks, those have been my experiences using LG's monster curved phablet big screened phone, the G Flex. And after having handled a couple big phones over the last couple weeks, I'm curious what motivates you to consider a large screen device. What kind of features are important to you and what kind of usage are you looking at when you're shopping a mini phone calling tablet? Leave me some comments down below. As always, folks, thanks so much for watching, for sharing my videos, for subscribing, getting into those discussions, getting into some fun debates. I've always appreciated how you guys interact with me, and I will catch you all on the next review.